Hello to all your White Lotus guests out there, and welcome to today's new breakdown. Now, after I recently shared my deep dive into the final trailer in preparation for the season finale, this time around I'll be sharing some more thoughts and predictions about the entire crew and the guests of the White Lotus. Now, with the episode title translating to Love of Fate, I feel like that is a big indicator for some major foreshadowing, and if past season finales have taught us anything, it's that we should brace ourselves for some potentially tragic outcomes. With that said, let's get into some predictions and have some fun. Now let's kick this off and talk about the crew and the owners of the White Lotus, and that's Muk, Gaidok, Fabian, Pongshi, Shatala, and Jim Hollinger. Now, I'll be honest, this season's staff of the White Lotus hasn't quite hit the heights of the drama that I'm used to from characters like an Armand or a Valentina for me, and it's nothing to do with the acting or the actors, it's just that their stories aren't as compelling as seasons previously. But I still think there's something to look forward to in the finale with these characters, so let's break them down, starting off with Fabian. Again, comparing him to the other managers of the White Lotus like an Armand or a Valentina, he's unfortunately gotten literally nothing to do this season. Now, I've mentioned this in past breakdowns, but I think Fabian might have some connections with Gary Gregg. He might be getting paid to subtly steer people like Belinda away from digging too deep into his past. But beyond that, I'm not expecting a massive impact from Fabian in the finale. Now, moving on to Pongshi, he to me fits a similar White Lotus mold, where you have a staff member like a Pongshi and Belinda finding themselves in a romantic relationship. Now again, we've seen this before, whether it's season 1 with Dylan and Armand, or you have season 2 with Isabella and Rocco, and if you know this show, none of those relationships ended up well. Now, I've seen some of you all mention how you think Pongshi may be connected to Gary Gregg in some way, very similar to how I feel about Fabian potentially, where he's being paid under the table to potentially distract Belinda. For example, the whole out of left field offer he made to Belinda a couple episodes ago with offering to start her business together with her just after having slept with her the night before. And again, this could point to signs of this being a part of Gary Gregg's grand plan to make sure Belinda doesn't blow up his spot. Now, if none of that comes to be true, then again, Pongshi's purpose was just to serve as a love interest for Belinda to give her character a little bit of attention to keep her busy other than being so tied into Gary Gregg. So similar to Fabian, I don't see Pongshi having much of an impact on the finale besides it being revealed that he's secretly on Gary Gregg's payroll. Now let's talk about another love interest between staff members, and that's Muk and Gaidok. Now, I think these two are adorable. Their romantic storyline has been heartwarming to witness, but if I'm being honest, there hasn't been a ton of juice to squeeze from them in most of their interactions, narratively speaking. Now, I know some of you all believe that Muk isn't as innocent as she's leaning on to be, and she may have some ties into the Russian robbers, or at the very least, she's bound to break Gaidok's heart and leave Thailand because she clearly wants more out of life than what Thailand has offered her so far. Now, with that said, I think she will have some big moment in the finale episode. I say that because I feel like you don't just stunt cast Lisa, who honestly I didn't know before the show started, but after doing some research, she's definitely a worldwide star who just had an album release right before the show started, and you don't have her shoot her first American show for 7 months, might I add, and don't give her something fun to do in the finale. Look, I've seen a lot of the interviews between the two actors that play these characters, and they have some really good chemistry. They seem to have fun with one another, and they enjoyed each other's company, and there's a lot of charm there and charisma. But again, I don't feel like the show has truly, I should say Mike White, I don't feel like he's truly taken on these characters and given them a lot to do.
I think about the girl all the time, yeah, yeah.
Where's the hook? I need the hook.
I like the way you work it.
No diggity.
I gotta bag it up. I like the way you work it, no diggity, I gotta bag it up.
Now, speaking of Gaidok, he to me definitely has the most potential to have the biggest impact of all the crew in the last episode. Right now, he's high on my list for being the potential character that dies. I spoke to this in my trailer breakdown, but I believe he's the one that Zion finds dead in the water, and I believe he's going to be accidentally shot by one of the local monkeys, which I know some of you all don't agree with that crazy theory, and I think it might actually been debunked, or one of the guests, or he gets shot by one of the Russians or the Hollinger's bodyguards. There definitely seems to be a shootout coming, and I think Hollander's bodyguards or the Russians, who we'll talk about a little bit later, will definitely be involved. But knowing Gaidok in his non-violent ways, I feel like he's going to hesitate at some point during this shootout and is going to end up getting him killed, or he's trying to protect Muk and he gets killed in doing so. Either way, it's unfortunate, but I do think Gaidok will die. I think it kind of plays into the overall theme of this story, and it plays into the old adage, good guys finish last. Look, I would love for Muk and Gaidok to survive, and maybe together they can run off in the sunset and live happily ever after. But again, I remind you all that those in a romantic relationship in the White Lotus staff has never gotten their happy ending. Now, when it comes to Shaitala, I don't believe she's gonna make much of a big splash in the finale. Now, initially, I thought that she was gonna maybe be more involved with the ladies group and with her being a fan of Jacqueline and all, but that really didn't go anywhere. To me, her character's role was to be in the hotel owner and to be in the means to tie the Rick and the Jim storylines together. Now, her husband, on the other hand, will have a different impact on the finale, and I know a lot of you all believe the theory is that he's going to be revealed to be Rick's dad. Now, this still may be true. We might have Jim revealing himself to be Rick's father, but I would have thought that when he had a gun pointing in his face, that would have been a perfect opportunity to make that reveal that I am your father, Rick, do not shoot me in the face. But maybe he didn't want to upset him more. He didn't want to get shot. So there's still a chance that he can be Rick's father, and he makes a return to the hotel, confronts Rick about why he left their family to pursue other things, and we might see him apologizing for leaving his mother. Or he's not his dad and he returns to the White Lotus with his bodyguards and he's looking to get revenge on Rick, and if the reputation of him killing people is to be true, then he's going to be looking to get rid of Rick because he knows he killed his real dad back in the day and that could ruin his current situation. But saying that all out loud, just thinking about it, Rick doesn't really have any evidence to prove that Jim killed his actual father, and the only potential witness to that would be Rick's mom, but we know that she's dead. Now, moving on to the past season's plot that made its way into this season, and that is Belinda and her son Zion and their ties to Gary Gregg and also Chloe. Now, we are all to assume that Zion's going to make it out of the season alive, but we don't know if what we saw in the opening sequence of the premiere episode is the end of the shooting, so he's not completely out of the woods. But assuming he's okay, I do wonder if this line here will come into play in the finale.
Come on, if you don't come to terms with him, he's gonna come after you. You know that, right? And they're gonna find your body in the Gulf of Thailand. Shit, maybe mine too.
Remember, unlike our other characters who are on vacation, Belinda and Zion are there for an extended period of time for Belinda's training, so the moment in which we found Zion finding that body laying in the water, that might be earlier in the day in the finale, but we don't know what's going to happen after that, especially with the finale being an hour and a half long. Now, putting the whole Zion living or dying aside for a second and just speaking of him and his mother's relationship, I really do hope that they're both going to be safe in the finale. And while I don't think Belinda will ultimately take the offer from Gary Gregg, I do have a feeling that Zion might secretly take some of the money. But again, check out my breakdown and hear their thoughts. But as it pertains to finale, I feel like even if Belinda doesn't take the money, I think that she still could walk away with a large sum of money by doing just this. What if she finds a way to get the police involved and either she gets a reward for turning him into the police, or maybe, sticking with my idea that Gary Gregg gets arrested, that will leave Chloe with his belongings and maybe she'll give Belinda money and she will be able to open up her spa that she wanted to all along. Now, tying that back to Gary Gregg and Chloe, I don't think either character will die in the finale, but as I just mentioned, I do see the justice for Tanya having a payoff, and Gary might end up getting arrested for her murder, or at least plotting for her murder. Now, even though Chloe isn't married to Greg Gary, I could still imagine her having access, if he is indeed to be arrested in the finale. I think she still has access to his more important valuable items, such as maybe hidden cash or taking possession of something like that, or even his yacht. And you know what? I'll throw this into the mix for like a Hail Mary surprise in the finale. What if we see Belinda finds Tanya's ex-assistant, which we know is Portia, and she helps with the whole Greg Gary gets arrested theory? Now, switching gears, let's briefly talk about some more criminals and talk about the Russian robbers, Valentin, Alexei, and Vlad. Now, I think what they have going on with the three women, and it seems to be some type of scheme to get money off of them, I think that situation and them robbing the hotel are two separate things. But I do think that both of these situations are the Russians getting involved and looking for some type of means to getting some instant cash. With that in mind, I think the Russians will try to rob the hotel again because they're thinking, hell, we already got away with it before, why not try it again? But this time around, here's where I believe Gaidok will maybe abandon his beliefs of non-violence and try to prove to his superiors and also Muk that he is equipped to handle these problems that arise in his career of being a security guard. But unfortunately, I think this will end up getting him killed, like I mentioned earlier. So I could see a scenario where we have the Hollinger's bodyguards, we have the Russians in this shootout, we have Gaidok trying to be a hero, he takes some of them out, he wounds some of them, but he notices that Muk is nearby, so he's distracted by her presence. Long story short, he's thinking that he's in the clear, he's protected Muk, he's proven to his supervisor that he does have that killer instinct, but again, I could see one of the Russians or the bodyguards who were thought to be down, but they weren't, and they end up shooting Gaidok and he falls in the water and he's the dead body seen by Zion. So let's switch from the darkness and go to some more lighter characters, and that is our smile on your face fake friend group, Kate, Lori, and Jacqueline Lemon. I don't see any of these women dying, but like season 1's Shane and Rachel or season 2's Harper and Ethan, all those being examples of pre-existing relationships that appear one way when we're introducing them on the island, but as the vacation unfolds, we see that there's cracks in their relationships. There's insecurities, there's jealousy, there are these resentments that's been built up amongst these people, and we've seen that on display in this season with our friend group. Now, I believe we're going to see Lori potentially leaving early after she comes to realize that Kate and Jacqueline aren't really her ride or die friends, but instead they're just people who act one way while you're with them, but they feel a completely different way about you when they talk behind your back. Especially when you look at the relationship between Jacqueline and Lori compared to how Kate fits into the scenario, I just feel like Lori doesn't seem to have much in common with them at this point in their lives, and honestly, I don't think she truly ever did. Now with that said, before Lori potentially heads home early, I do think we're gonna actually see a real conversation between all of the three women. We're gonna see them putting all their issues about one another on the table, but instead of coming closer together and actually loving each other and appreciating each other and being honest with one another, I think that big conversation or potentially big fight between them will actually split them up for good, or they just keep on the facade, they continue to be fake friends and they pretend to care for one another and they leave on good terms, but deep down they know this will be the last time they're ever going to speak with each other again. Now on to our yin and yang couple, and that's Rick and Chelsea, and also including their freaky ass friend, my boy Frank. Again, I do believe Rick will have a final confrontation with Jim, and unfortunately, I think Chelsea's third bad luck wish will come to fruition, and that being Rick's death. This scene here in the trailer where Rick and Chelsea are happy and smiling and hugging, to me gives very dreamy vibes. Knowing this season's theme of tapping into spirituality, I think this could be the afterlife. I think Rick is imagining a happy ending for them both, or it could be Chelsea. But sticking with Rick here, like I said before, I still think that Jim being his dad is still on the table, but if not, I could see either Jim confronting Rick and explaining what actually happened between him and his actual father, or again, he comes back to Thailand seeking revenge from their last encounter. Either way, I just feel like I don't see Rick making it out of the finale alive, or maybe he will be responsible for another person's death. And that person being Chelsea. Look, we already know she's been through hell on this vacation, with being held at gunpoint to being bitten by a snake. And maybe she's been warning herself and not Rick about this third bad thing that's gonna happen. And that third bad thing being her death. and it being Rick's responsibility because of his decision to confronting Jim, and she gets caught up in the big shootout, and I see her maybe getting shot during that whole scene potentially. Now, hopefully Chelsea makes it out okay, because I like the character a lot, and I do in my gut feel like Rick is going to be the one that dies. And if that does come to be true and he does die, I think Chelsea will eventually come to terms with her being in this very unfulfilling relationship, and she gonna know that she lost the battle that she spoke about with Saxon in episode 7. And I think that we're gonna see her maybe starting to have some self-respect, and we're gonna see her moving on to hopefully a better and brighter future. Now, speaking to the wild man, Freaky Frank himself, I do think that we will see him helping Rick out, and he's gonna provide him with another gun, because we know that Rick got rid of the gun in Bangkok. He's getting a new gun in anticipation for something bad happening, and another confrontation with Jim, who's going to come back to Thailand to the White Lotus as well. And hell, maybe Frank goes to Thailand with Rick, and in doing so, maybe he'll see Gary Gregg, and he'll say to Gary Gregg, hey, aren't you the guy that responded to that ad that I put in that one time? And we know how the rest of that story goes. Now let's end this conversation with talking about the very loving and very dark thought thinking and drug-induced family of the Ratliffs. Now, I think Piper will ultimately admit to her mother that she's not going to be staying in Thailand after all. I think she is going to tell her mother that it was a phase, like she said weeks ago, or she's going to tell her mother that she was just looking for a way to get away from them. Now, speaking of Victoria, I've seen some of you all believe that it may be revealed that she might be the one behind Timothy's case back home, and she actually helped the feds. Personally, I don't see that happening, because I don't know why she would do that. She's going to break up her family. She's going to lose all of her money. Or maybe she cut a deal with them. Who knows? That would be an interesting plot if that does come to be true. Now, I don't see Victoria dying at the end, but instead, I think she will be dealing with a very serious tragedy because of what I believe will happen to her husband and her 2 sons. Now, even though I felt like the trailer was being a little bit too heavy-handed in showing us the blender and the poisonous fruit, or at least thinking that that is the poisonous fruit in the blender, I still do think that Timothy will ultimately make that poison smoothie as seen in the trailer. But before that, I do think that we will see him telling the truth about what's happening back home. After dreaming about unaliving his family and himself multiple times, I do think he's going to make the smoothies, thinking that death is a better option for them instead of for losing everything, including their status back home. Now, I don't think he's going to make smoothies for everyone in the family. I think he's going to make smoothies for Saxon and Victoria, because they're the only ones that have expressed their outlook on life without having money. Plus, if you think about it, they were the only 2 people that he imagined killing in his dreams. So the way I have it in my head is he's going to make the smoothies for himself and for those 2 other family members, but before giving it to them, he's going to get interrupted, because at this point, they're going to get their phones back. He's going to see the news on his phone that the case back home isn't as bad as he initially thought, or it's completely taken care of. But unfortunately, it's going to be too late, because in the other room, Saxton or his mother, Victoria, or both of them have already drank the smoothie and die. But as I mentioned in my previous breakdown, I don't know if they're going to die. If someone drinks the smoothie, I don't know if they're going to die immediately, because I don't know the ramifications of that poison. I don't know if the poison is going to temporarily have them being affected by it, or if they're going to quickly die once they consume it. But if whoever consumes it, whether it is, in my thought, Victoria or Saxon, if they do consume it and they don't die in doing so, that idea of him poisoning his family will break their family, and that could lead to Timothy being arrested. Now, that leaves us with one last Ratliff, and it's the one that has no idea who they are as an individual. They're trying to please everyone in their family, especially their siblings, and that's Lachlan, who I believe is seen in the trailer drowning and getting pulled down by a crocodile, and he's going to die in the process. My thought process behind the tragic death of Lachlan is him wearing this shirt, which can be seen on the screen now, and as you all can see, there's crocodiles on the shirt. But also, speaking of crocodiles, they can be seen in the opening credits, which, speaking of the opening credits, as you all can see, there is a person seen under the water who appears to be dead, and also you'll notice the name on the screen is the actor that plays Lachlan. So there you have it. I think that is a perfect place to end this breakdown. So I believe we are going to witness a tragic finale where fate and destiny intertwine to shape the characters' fates. While some characters might escape unscathed, others are destined for heartbreak and potential death. Now, I really do hope that they stick the landing in this finale, and we'll talk about it further in my breakdown about the highs and lows of the overall season. But speaking of hope, I do hope that the season's exploration of religion and ambition and violence and the corrupting influence of capitalism really sets the stage for an entertaining number one and also devastating climax that reaffirms the White Lotus' cynical view of the human nature and the elusive pursuit of happiness. So what do you all think? Which characters are doomed? Who's gonna live? Who's gonna die? Will Belinda take the money? Will she take down Gary? Will there be a happy ending for anyone? Or will they all just end up dying and it'd be a tragic ending? So let me know your predictions in the comments below. Be sure to like this video, share this video, also subscribe to my YouTube channel, but also this is available in podcast form, so follow me on my own podcast to get more White Lotus breakdowns, theories, and all things TV and movie. Don't forget to join me this coming Sunday of the finale, where I might go back-to-back streams with a watch party followed by a live after show. With all that being said, you all are awesome, stay safe, and I'll see you soon.